30 people. I wonder what the other 200 are thinking right now.
Good point on
Folks, for the 30 of you that can understand me, we have a few options for our electronic box that the company's given us. It'll point out a few things, a bit shameless advertising. And third option is I can try and do one myself if you like. Now here we'd like option number 1, firstly, peace and quiet. Yeah, do something like that. No one, just me. Oh, 3 of us. If I hold my hand up, we're not fighting for it. Now who would like option number 2, the shameless audio? Yeah, it's really bad. Who would like myself? I was afraid you might say that. Now folks, I do just want to point out we're not paid tour guides, we're not trained tour guides either, we are just the crew. We pick up the microphone to point out what we know, sometimes what we don't know, we just wing it. So I will speak slowly and clearly for everyone, just to try and help you guys understand what I'm saying, because it does only come in a huge way. Right, we might as well just start slightly behind us because it is such a national monument. You've got Tower Bridge, June 30th, 1894, first time it was opened. The only bridge in the world to be part suspension and bascule. Suspension of the roadsides and the bascule is the main centre part that opens. It is open all year round. You can go and walk across it. You can go and walk over the top of the bascules as well. The walkways have glass floors. You can see down onto the river if you like. Gets its name from the Tower of London on our right hand side. Only original part of the tower is that main fortress or keep that you see in the centre there, built by William the Conqueror's forces shortly after his conquest of southern England. Normally we try and point you to the wall to the bloody tower because it's some of the best history that we like to point out, and it is just over there behind those bloody trees which are in the bloody hole. So I can only apologise. Now if you take a look to the left, the next thing I want to point out is over there, but I have been told it is quite difficult to spot. You see, just slightly ahead of us there is something that is very well camouflaged on the River Thames. You've got the HMS Belfast, the C-37 Town Class Light Cruiser. Built and launched in Belfast 1939. She was built in the same shipyards as the Titanic, the Holland and Wolff shipyards. So we think this one did slightly better. Launched in 1939, as I said, she fought throughout World War II. She was influential in the sinking of the German pocket battleship, the Scharnhorst. I believe she was the first battleship to be fitted with active radar. Fired on Juno Beach at D-Day in support of our Canadian allies. She was the UN's flagship at the Korean campaign for the 1950s. She packed a lot into the 15 years she was into service, but she was hit by a magnetic mine and forced to retire in that Korean campaign. And she now sits part of the Imperial War Museum, so you can pay a small amount and go and take a self-guided tour around it. Now a bit of trivia for you. Right up at the front there, you've got a Union Jack. It's the only Union Jack you're going to see in London. And that is for 2 reasons. To be a Union Jack and not a Union flag, it needs to be flown at the front of a British warship. And I think the Belfast qualifies. Secondly, on the end of a wooden jackstay or pole, which it is. So that's any other flag that you see like that, any one that you see in London Bridge City, the one on top of Customs House, the one on top of the House of Parliament, they are all Union flags only. That is the only Union Jack. Unless they've snuck a warship somewhere into London, but to be honest, there's only one river, and I'm pretty sure we see it, so as far as I'm aware, that's the only. Now continuing over there on the left, you've got Europe's tallest building, the Shard of Glass, or the Shard at London Bridge, which is its official name. It stands at 1,017 feet tall. We have been told it is finished. Not too sure. Now, there are quite a few different things happening in the Shard, folks. It's mostly apartments and sort of office space and stuff like that, and a couple of shops and stuff. On the 39th floor, there is a bar called the Shangri-La. It's free to go up there. It is quite expensive once you're up there, but like I said, free to get up there. They just insist that someone buys a drink for your party. It normally costs about £10–12 a drink, and it gives you sort of similar views as the London Eye. If you want to go the full hog, go up to the 90th floor. It's Europe's tallest viewing platform, because it is Europe's tallest building. So 90th floor, you have the view at the Shard. It costs you around about £30 a ticket to get up there, and it gives you views, I'm told, of around about 40 miles in all directions on a nice day. It's well worth doing. Now, a little known monument here in London, well, some people do know it, but a lot of people don't see it. Just on the right, between the next two buildings, you've got a tall column with a golden candle on the top. This is the monument to the Great Fire of London in 1666, designed by Sir Christopher Wren. It's the world's tallest freestanding column at 202 feet tall. Lie on its side to the east, it will land on the site in Pudding Lane where the fire started all those years ago. This is the world famous London Bridge. I can just tell you're overwhelmed by that fact. If you don't believe me, just look over there on the right, London Bridge. On the left, it's written over there as well, and on the other side of that. This is London Bridge. It's the fifth major bridge to span this area on the Thames. The first two washed away with the tide, third one burned down. The fourth one was sinking. The Thames body is very soft around this area, it's quite high as well, it's quite shallow. It's a nice American man named Mr. McCulloch bought it, thinking he was buying Tower Bridge. They actually stood him on London Bridge, facing Tower Bridge, unsold in London. It stands over Lake Havasu in Arizona. Has anyone seen that bridge in Arizona? It is there, folks, I'm not making it up, but nothing. Now, if we have any fans of Pirates of the Caribbean, something of interest for you, over on the left, we have London's very own pirate ship. Now folks, get a really good photo of that. Just like the films, we have the pirate ship. This is the replica Golden Hind, so Francis Drake's famous boat that went around the world in the 17th century. It's a fully seagoing replica. It actually sits in water. It's in the St Mary's Overy wet dock, which means it sits in water. It's done the trip twice. They're saving up to do it the third time at some point. Now, if you do want to go and take a tour of it, they do allow you to do that. Quite honestly, I have no idea when it's open, but even if you go along and it's shut, it's a bit of a win-win because right next door you've got the old Thames side in, so you can just go and get drunk instead. Very nice pub.
तो लोहे का
Now,
लगता
talking of Thames pubs,
ये बेस लोहे की लगती है
Cannon Street Railway Bridge, look left, there's a building with red windows. That is the second oldest tidal Thameside pub, dating back to 1615. The Anchor Tavern, or the Anchor at Bankside. It's famous for a couple of other reasons as well. If anyone's seen the first Mission Impossible film, that's the building they're seen drinking out of at the very end. William Shakespeare used the top floor as changing room for when the original Globe Theatre was roughly speaking where the FT building is now. It's also where the first ever English dictionary is reported to have been written. Not sure what that says for our language, that it was done in a pub, but I'll take it. London's ugliest and, to be frankly honest, most pointless bridge we're going underneath now, Southwark. Pointless because nobody can find it. They've given it away in London to replace system from the rat and everything else. So we only really see taxis and buses up there. I see the two people there. They've actually been up there for about a week. They have no idea how to get off. We were throwing them bottles of water yesterday to try and help them off. It's terrible, really. We might send help. Now, I mentioned the original Globe used to be in the area just where the FT building is there. We have a replica Globe Theatre now in London. White building with a thatch roof. It was designed by Samuel Wanamaker, the famous film director. He was shocked and appalled that there wasn't a monument to the man that's been torturing school children in schools for hundreds of years. So he decided to go out of his way and build a building where they could torture more school children by making them sit and watch his plays instead. It wasn't plain sailing though. It took them nearly 20 years to get permission for the roof, because the roof technically is illegal. It's made of wooden thatch. It's illegal in London since 1666. He got a special permit, partly because of the historical value and partly because of the amount of firefighting systems he's put in there. And you can now go and see some of Shakespeare's works in there. But they tend to only do it in the summer, because like I said, it is a full replica. So they've still got the hole in the roof, the acoustics, there's no lighting, heating, sound systems, and it's wooden benches as well. Now, some more classical stuff is just over on the right. You've got St Paul's Cathedral, standing 365 feet tall from bottom to the Great Fire in 1666. It has the world's second largest unsupported dome on the top. Does anyone know where the only one of its type larger than that is? Not Rome, not Florence, the Vatican City, St Peter's Basilica. It's the only one of its type larger than that. Now ahead of us we have a group of bridges that we call the Blackfriars because they are so close together. It's 2.5 to 3 bridges, depending on how you classify them. First one that you see is the Blackfriars Rail. Second one that you'll see is the support columns for the old Alexandria Rail. The last one is the Blackfriars Road. Now, Blackfriars Railway Bridge recently underwent a £500 million redevelopment. They widened it, they strengthened it, and they put the train station on the top of the bridge. They wanted to do that so it could act as the hub train station for the 2012 Olympics. So all the tourists and spectators would come through this station and then onto Stratford and any other side. And then honestly, folks, none of us were surprised when it was eventually delivered in 2014 and not in 2012 as they wanted. It is the world's largest train station over water though, and it is a completely solar panelled roof. I saw them tweet a few weeks ago. Now they did all of that because, as you see right and left, take a look at these support columns, you'll see there's quite a bit of damage in them. And that's because the weight and speed and particular frequency of the more modern trains going across bridges nowadays were just too much for Brunel's Railway Bridge. Quite an old bridge, it's quite a nice looking one, but not very strong. So did that. And this is the oldest bridge we'll pass underneath on our trip, Blackfriars Road. Now they get the name Blackfriars, it's not just a random name, from the site just on the north shore to the right. When you see that curved building, Unilever House, in the 15th, 16th century it's thought that there was a monastery to have stood there where the friars always wore black habits, hence Blackfriars for the area, for the bridges. Also why you see stone pulpits all along the bridge as a sort of celebration. Now over on the left, ladies and gents, we'll go over this way now. The red brick building that you see there with the tower at the top is known as the Oxo Tower. Now the Oxo Gravy Company bought it in the 70s to act as their main headquarters and production facility, and also to act as a great big advertisement in the country's capital. Now, just a little bit of information. The River Thames is what's known as a royal highway. It's classed as a royal highway. In effect, the Queen owns it. She hates advertising, like you wouldn't believe, folks. Well, you don't see Costas, Starbucks, McDonald's, anything like that up and down the river. Now, they applied to have neon letters put across the front of that building, and they were told in no uncertain terms, don't do it. So they decided to have the tower built in the middle. We're told it was a complete accident that the windows spelled out the letters OX and O. Handily enough, their name brand. Now the Crown actually took them to court. They said you've got to take it down, you've got to do something with it, but you can't say Oxo. To this day, I don't know how they did it, but Oxo won that court battle. They went in, and their genuine argument was, it's not our fault, it's the window fitters. We wanted 2 circular and a square window, and that's what they did. And they won. They won with that, folks. Absolutely awesome. And just to remind us of the completely honest mistake that they made, of course, those letters light up bright red at night so we can see them across most of them. Nowadays, it's shops and boutiques along the bottom, flats that are just completely unaffordable in the middle, and the Harvey Nichols restaurant at the top. Now, back on the right-hand side, these green lion's heads that are dotted along the Victorian embankment. One of the most common questions we were asked is, what are they and why are they there? Well, folks, they're green lion's heads, as you can see, and they're a flood defect. And that's genuine, they're a flood defect. Now, back before we had the Thames barrier at Woolwich to help us control the tides and tell how high, low, etc. we could get, that was all we had for Central London. The theory was, if the water ever reached the lion's mouths, the police were to evacuate the undergrounds and the riverfronts on either side, because they didn't know if it was going to come over and start flooding stuff. So they came up with a rhyme to help them remember this. When the lion's heads are drinking, then London is sinking. It's pathetically easy, even for the police folks. Now, there is a company here on the River Thames. It's a company that basically every boat person is a part of. It's known as the Waterman and Lighterman Company. Henry VIII started it, so it dates back to him. Both me and the captain are a part of it. We think we have a more appropriate one. When the lion's heads are ducked, then London is well and truly flooded. Flooded, folks. I don't know what you guys were thinking. Now, as we're on a boat in a river, we might as well talk about another boat that's floating on the river. Over on the right there, you've got this black and white hulled boat called the St. Catherine. She's a former royal barge, so in effect she was the Queen's personal boat for a while. But as you can see, she's very high. What you can't see is she's very deep as well. It makes her impractical for the river. At times we can't fit through bridges for height, and at times we can't get past London Bridge for depth. So they sold this one to Moore here. It's now a restaurant and bar called the Yacht at Temple here. She now sort of goes up and down if she's on the river and stuff like the Gloriana, the Royal. Now, has anyone on the boat seen a program called Saving Lives at Sea? Seen a TV program called Saving Lives at Sea? Fair enough. It was done by the BBC for a charity here in the UK called the RNLI, the Royal National Lifeboat Institution. In effect, lifeboats are smaller boats that basically go to boats that are in trouble, go to people that are in trouble at sea on our inland waterways. There are 237 lifeboat stations across the UK, folks. We have 4 on the River Thames because this is an incredibly dangerous stretch of water. 2 further upriver, 1 downriver, Tower lifeboat on the right-hand side. Now, these are volunteers, folks. They risk their own lives for no monetary reward. That is the busiest lifeboat station in the country. Last year, they answered just over 550 emergency call-outs. This year, they're projecting they're going to hit nearly 700 emergency call-outs, more than 2 a day. Just the other week, they had 13 emergency calls in 12 hours. And they don't get paid for that. They volunteer their own time and they risk their own lives to help other people in trouble. They are a charity, they rely on donations, particularly from the public. I donate every single month to them. I encourage others to do so if you have the opportunity. I'm going from the serious to sort of the more laid back. I will start talking about a famous clock tower in a little bit. Can't quite see it yet. Not just because of the scaffolding that's there, but you'll see that later. What I want to do is point you over to the right. Can everybody see the clock face in the middle of that big building right in the centre over there? Everyone got that clock face? Perfect. So quick show of hands, folks. Who thinks that clock face is bigger than the clock face at Big Ben? Oh, one person. Who thinks it's smaller than the clock face at Big Ben? Who doesn't really care about clock faces? Folks, that's Big Ben's eye. It's actually a foot bigger than the clock face at Big Ben. So size doesn't matter. In fact, the minute hand is so heavy, it takes a full 60 minutes to do a rotation. That's a bit of a supple one for you there, folks. There's quite a few blank faces up and down. I'll let that one settle in. Whilst that do, just this tall stone needle that you see over there just in front of that building, Cleopatra's Needle, older than London itself, 3,500 years old. One of 3. You've got this one, there's one in Paris, and there's one in New York as well. That one was a gift to us in 1819 after Nelson had routed Napoleon's French forces, the Battle of the Nile in 1797. Now ahead west, we've got the Charing Cross Railway Bridge with the Golden Jubilee and Hungerford footbridges. Now folks, as you can see, there are people walking along that bridge. Try and give them a wave. We're very friendly people on this boat, aren't we? Just give them a wave. Also, if you're waving up and they're waving back, they're not throwing anything at you. Which does happen. I mean, I'm protected by the roof. You guys are pretty open. Now again, I'm protected from this, but if you do feel any water dropping on your heads, folks, don't worry. Seriously, it's nothing to worry about at all. Just the train's emptying their toilets before they get into the station over there on the right track. Now there is another footbridge there, guys. Give those guys a wave. Very happy people here in London, especially with the weather. To be honest, I wish it just rained, but there you go. Now there is a lot to talk about in this next little stretch of river, and there's next to no time to talk about it, so do bear with me, I'll try and get everything done. Over on the left, you've got the 4th largest observation wheel in the world, the London Eye. Opened in the year 2000, she was only supposed to be stood there for 2 years. And here we are nearly 20 years later. I can only assume they took a look at the bank balance at the end of the 2nd year and decided they liked what they saw and they were going to keep it going. Quite honestly, we don't call it the London Eye anymore. We call it the Wheel of Fortune. There's good reason for that. It'll operate for around about 14 hours a day during the summer, 30-minute trips, 32 pods, 25 people in those pods, and they each have paid £30 a ticket. We reckon that's nearly £300,000 in profit every week. Still not enough to buy you a house anywhere near London, but that's some pretty decent beer money right there. Now as well, you can get married on the London Eye if that's something that you're thinking about doing. That's the only time they will stop the Eye outside of scheduled maintenance. They'll load you at the bottom there, 15 minutes at the top. They'll stop it for 5 minutes. So you can say your vows, have a couple of photos, a few drinks, etc, etc. And the captain reliably informs me it's all the way downhill after. Now folks, we are just ever so slightly ahead of time, which means the boat on our berth at the moment isn't supposed to leave for another 5-6 minutes. So we've got a special treat for you. We're going to take you through Westminster Bridge, which is something we can't normally do, partly because of tide and height and everything else, partly because that's normally free, so it's free. But today we have the tide, we have the height, so we're going to take you through and give you a good shot for the Houses of Parliament, Big Ben, etc. Now folks, a quick show of hands. Over on the right hand side over there, who can see Big Ben? Ignore the scaffolding just for a minute. Who can see Big Ben? Quite a few of you. Who thinks that might have been a trick question? Folks, you can't see Big Ben. You can see the Queen Elizabeth Clock Tower. It's the St Stephen's Clock Tower as it was before 2012. Big Ben, the very famous name, it's the name of the bell inside the clock tower. 13.5 tons it weighs. It's the thing that makes the racket on the hour every, well, I say it makes the racket, it doesn't anymore. They're fixing the tower, so the bell's going to be silent until 2022, they think. 2022 is the next time it will be regularly used. And his name's Big Ben after Sir Benjamin Paul. In effect, he was the man in charge of getting the bell to the top of the tower. And we were told he was about 4 foot high and 4 foot wide, so it's quite a good name for such a bell. They didn't follow tradition though. Tradition would have been first and last name to name such a historic monument. Benjamin was the guy's middle name. They had a meeting. They decided they couldn't possibly call that bell Big Richard. Again, folks, that's another pretty subtle one. A few more black faces to all over for so I'll leave that one. As I do, we're just going past the world famous Houses of Parliament, or the Palace of Westminster. Now, this building isn't actually all that old. It dates back to the mid-1800s because the last one burnt down. This one's not doing any better. There are 1,100 rooms in there. The BBC, the broadcasting company, the main broadcasting company for the country, did a report. They reckon there's around about £8 billion worth of damage to that building. 8 billion. And if they started today, it would take them a little over 40 years to fix it and complete all the works. They also did a report outlining how much it would cost to knock it down and start again. That's going to be about 2 billion. It takes just under 20 years. But we couldn't possibly inconvenience our MPs, could we? Gotta have them. Have you taken a look at the Victoria Tower, which is that one just directly behind us now, shortly on our left? Take a look at the flag on the top. Would you believe me if I told you that flag was the same size as a tennis court? Well, folks, that was what the MPs told us. Why would we have any reason to doubt them? Now, the Victoria Tower itself is home to any election, any ballots that we have in the country. They're stored in that tower for a year and a day after the date of that vote, just in case of anything challenges. Now, the bridge ahead of us, Westminster Bridge, is actually quite a unique bridge. I'll talk about that in a sec, but take a look behind you. You've got Lambeth Bridge, just in the distance. You'll notice that's red, or at least partly red, and I'm pretty sure you all know this one's green. Well, folks, that's not random. Lambeth Bridge is red for the House of Lords, green for the House of Commons. Now, back when the House of Parliament genuinely was, the Lords were lords, landowners, everything else, and the Commoners were genuinely farmers picked out of the field and thrown into there to basically vote and stuff. The Lords decided they couldn't possibly be expected to share the same bridge to get to the House of Parliament. They actually had their own bridge built for them over there at Lambeth. So they walked over Lambeth Bridge to go to the House of Lords, and the Commoners were left with Westminster to get it. Now, I mentioned the Westminster Bridge is quite unique. You can see there's there's a lot of arches basically. There's 7 navigation arches. 3 of them we can't really use. 2 because there's exclusions over the House of Parliament, and they would probably shoot us if we went in there. Come pretty close before. And 1 just because it'd be stupid to use. But folks, there are so many arches because there's so many supports. The River Thames bed, seabed here, is incredibly soft and it keeps moving. So their idea to put a bridge over here was just we'll keep putting supports in and it will hold the bridge in place. But around about 20 years ago, they actually had to dive on the bridge because they started noticing it was getting damaged and they thought it was moving. And what they found, the supports underneath the bridge had rotted away completely. The supports had completely rotted. So you can just about see, just at this state of tide, you can see the bridge, the supports there, and then you can still see the cement sort of cofferdams that they've had to put in. Those are basically to reinforce the bridge and make sure that none of the rot's going to continue anything else. Now the bridge is absolutely fine now, folks. There is nothing wrong with it at all, as you can see by the hundreds of tourists walking across it, and especially all the buses.
The big tour here, então esse pessoal do seu faz café, eu sou uma pessoa que trabalha
So it's just not talking because there's boats everywhere, just trying to work out what each one's doing, which is sometimes easier said than done. But as we wait for our berth, there's a couple more things I can talk about with you. First one's County Hall, this building on the left with the green turret. In the middle. Now, it used to be the home of the Greater London Council or Assembly, whatever they called themselves back before 2002, also home to the London Mayor. That big building there was where they did their work. Bit of a waste for such a big building, to be quite honest. They moved down towards the tower in 2002. They've turned this into pretty much everything else. There's a hotel, there's restaurants and shops and everything else around the back. You've got the Shrek's Adventure right in the middle there. I don't have a clue what that is before you ask me, folks. Nobody's ever told me what that is. I don't really fancy going there to find out. You've got the dungeon, you've got the aquarium there as well. You've got Namco Funscape, which is a game arcade. You've got Frette as well. An interesting thing to note, we believe over there is the only McDonald's in the world to not have the golden M on the front door in County Hall. Again, Royal Highway, Queen, advertising, no. They haven't found a cheeky way around it. So.